Access 2016, Module 1, Part 1. We're going to be creating a table in the Datasheet view. So we are going to begin by opening our Access database software. You need to make sure you are using Access version 2016 for this particular series of modules. We're going to begin by clicking a blank database. We're going to start using this blank desktop database option. And when we get to this screen, we want to make sure that we pay attention to several things. First of all, we need to know where the information is being saved. So I'm going to browse because I want to change that location. You can save it where you would like. I'm going to go in and save it under my files used in the videos. And then I'm also going to change the name. I don't want it to be called Database 2. I want it to be called Riverview. So I'm going to type Riverview. Once you have established the name and the location, then you click OK. You can again verify them here on this screen. Remembering this Browse button allows us to change the location. And then choose Create. This will begin creating a database for us. I'm going to enlarge this to use my full screen. All right, we have a database called Riverview. Now we have to start creating objects within that database. Now I did want to point out that if you do have a touch screen, there are instructions that will allow you to switch to touch mode. So we can choose here, touch mouse mode. So if we choose this, we can change it to a touch screen or leave it in mouse mode. So you can utilize that technique so that it works most efficiently for you on your computer. I'm not going to change to touch screen. I'm going to leave it in mouse mode. Okay, so the first thing we can do is we can rename a field. So if I double click on ID, I can change that name to be Visit ID. When you hit enter, it will then save that name for you. Now Access creates this first field for us. It creates a field that is unique, indicating that that is the key, the primary key for this table. Excuse me. Now also you'll notice that this field is preset to auto number, which means that each record that you enter, it will automatically increment the visit ID beginning with a 1 and continuing on numerically. If I don't want that to be auto number, if I want to be able to put in my own information, I can change that data type by clicking this drop down. And I am going to choose short text. Most people recommend that unless a value is going to have mathematical equations using that you should use a text field instead of a number field. So number fields would be reserved for fields that would have potentially math performed on them, such as an invoice amount if I wanted to add up all my invoices, or could be an age if I wanted to calculate the average age of all of my participants, something like that. All right, so now we can add additional fields. So we are going to start by adding, we're going to leave that one short text, and then we're going to add a new field. There are different ways that we can do that. So for example, see here where it says click to add, I could click that drop down and choose the field type there. So I could add a field type of short text, and then it allows me to name that field. So I could say this is the animal ID. Now, right now we are using a technique of labeling our fields without spaces in them. Access does in fact allow you to include spaces, but many people don't, because if I need to move this database into a higher end database later on, such as Microsoft SQL, that database program and a lot of the other ones do not allow spaces. So if I did have to convert to a larger database later on, this would help with that conversion. So you will see this as a common naming technique. For this class, just make sure you name the fields exactly the way they are given to you in the assignment, as far as spacing, upper, lower, and type and spelling. So make sure they're exact. The next field we're going to add is a date and time. Now again, we could click here, but I also wanted you to see this group up here called Add and Delete on our ribbon under the Fields tab. We can click on date and time there, and it would add another field for us. We're going to name this one visit date. So once you add the field, you can just begin typing and it'll bring the name in. If I wanted to add another field, and this time I want it to again be a short text, I can name that field reason. And finally, the last field we'll use, again, you can use either this add and delete group or the drop down list here. I'm going to choose a yes or no field, and I'm going to label this one OffSite. So you can see we have 5 fields specified currently in our table. So if I wanted to add some data, I would probably actually save my fields before I added data into them. They don't in the textbook, but I'm going to go ahead and I am going to save our table. We want this table to be called visit. So if I come up here and I click the Save button, notice it says it is saving a table. So it's asking you for the table name. The database itself, it does not need to be saved as we're working on individual objects. It's the objects within the database that you will be saving. So I'm going to start out by saving this table and call it visit. And notice when I click OK, it changes the name both on my tab as well as over here on my list of objects. As you'll see, as we progress through this module, we will have different visual pictures to indicate the type of object it is. Also, we can have it listed on our access pane by the different object types, such as tables. When we save a table, we are saving the structure of that table, how it is set up, the field types, the field names, how large the columns are when they display on the screen. But what we are not saving is the data. The data within the table gets saved each time you move to a new record. So once we start typing in some data, you're going to notice that this asterisk next to the row will turn into a pencil. So I'm going to type in a visit ID of 1072. So notice now we get a pencil. The pencil indicates that we are editing that record. Until the pencil goes away, your changes have not been saved. But once the pencil disappears, your entering or your editing of that record has been saved. So we're going to tab between fields. And we are, one point I wanted to bring up here. If you began to try to type in 1072 for a visit ID, and it would not let you type in that field, then you forgot to change the visit ID data type from AutoNumber to ShortText. So you will need to make that change. All right, the next field is our animal ID, and it's 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. Tab to the next field. Now notice you can use a calendar lookup, or you can type the values in. So I'm going to type in 12, 12, 16. And when I tab, you'll notice it defaulted to 2016. So it assumes that that is the year we are working with. If we were trying to type in 1999, since we are in the 2000s, you would have to probably type that in. So, you have to watch these dates to make sure you see the default information that's being filled in to make sure it's correct. Our reason is going to say vaccinations. And then finally, in our last field, OffSite, we are going to want to check the box that yes, that was OffSite. Now what we could do is there's a couple ways you can check the box. I could click on it with my mouse. Click on it again, it goes off. Or I could hit the space bar. And when you hit the space bar a second time, it takes it off. So you can check the boxes either way. And now when I hit tab, it takes me down to the next record, and the information that I have typed in the first record has been saved into my table since the pencil disappeared. It's important to remember that when you're making changes to other records. You have to go in and correct something until you move to the next record so that the pencil disappears. Your changes have not been saved. All right, now we're going to add several more records. If you want to look in your book for these records, you will see them in figure 111 on page AC16. So we're going to enter all of the records that are in that table, that figure 111. And notice on this next record for the spaying, the answer to OffSite is no. So you're going to leave that box unchecked. And again, once the pencil disappears, the record is saved. So when you're done, you should have those 8 records listed. The second one from the bottom, the reason reads injured, leg, and hoof. Now once the pencil has disappeared, you can see that all of those data records have been saved into our table. So before we do our next task, I want to go ahead and close the table. And then we're going to reopen it so you can see how this works. Now, the first thing I want you to notice when you close it is there's 2 X's. You have an X here and an X up here. This top X is going to close access. So it's going to close the database completely. And if you do that, you're going to have to reopen your Access database in order to get back in. It's a much slower process. This bottom one will simply close the object that you are currently actively working with, which in this case is our visit table. So you always want to use this bottom X until you get to the point where you're completely done working with access. Then you should use the top one. So we're going to use this bottom X, and we're going to close the visit table. Notice, because I saved it, I saved the structure right before I entered all my data. It did not ask me if I wanted to save changes because I did not change the screen or any of the field properties, the size they were on the screen, the type they were, or the field names, or anything of that nature. All I did was enter data, and that's saved as I input it. So there were no changes to save. Now if I reopen it, you're going to notice that one thing that happened is it sorts. It is sorting by your primary key. So it resorted our records when we opened the table. That should tell you that when you go to add new records, you do not have to worry about adding them in the middle. You simply come to the first available row to add those. Now, if I wanted to change the size of a column, I could click on the column and drag and drop, just like we did in Excel. I could right-click on a column and choose field width and set a number here. Or I could double-click, which is called Best Fit in Access. And Best Fit will look at my data, just like AutoFit did in Excel. You may have noticed, in addition to the double-click technique, in Access, when we go to the Filled With dialog box, we also have a Best Fit button on that as well. Now, if I were to close my file, or my table, you're going to have it ask you if you want to save the changes. Because we changed the column width, that is a structural change. So it asks us if we want to save, and we can say yes. Then when we open it back up, it should have retained that, and I'm not sure why it didn't. So I'm going to go ahead and save those changes. And now we're going to add another few records. So if we go all the way to the end for new, we can start typing. Another thing you'll notice that you can do is we can go down here to new record. Click that, it would bring us down there, and this would also. In our case, since there are so few records, it's just as easy to just click there. But those are a couple other ways that you can get to that new record. And then also down here. All right, we're going to begin with 1036, 12294, and these are on page Access AC21. It's on 11, 29, 16, for declawing, and we're not going to check it. And then we have 1152, with 12318 on 11317 for not eating, and we're not going to check it. So now if we close our table, again, it's not going to ask us if we want to save the changes because all we did is enter the data. Now we also talked here about we can double click on the visit table over in our access pane. This shows us all the objects and allows us to choose which one we want to open. And that completes creating our visit table when we started out creating a brand new blank database.